Hi, so I decided to read The Hidden Injuries of Class by Richard Sennett and Jonathan Cobb, and specifically the chapters on the divided self. Um, this is more of a sociology book written in the early 70s on some research done in the late 60s. It's very interesting. It's definitely a part of economics I find. An interesting aspect to look at. I mean, basically, the book examines the effects of class barriers um, on working class, blue collar workers by looking at occupational, ethnic backgrounds of these white, but like second, third generation European immigrants in an area in Boston. So it's kind of a small sample size, but I think it speaks a lot to a lot of the issues that were being dealt with regards to class and um, upward mobility. Um, so, I just wanted to start with a quote from Warren Buffett, who, in some ways he's um, evolved somewhat on his views, but, I think this quote says it all. There's a class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. And I think why this book was important, The Hidden Injuries of Class, is because, like I said, it's written in the late 60s. It's research in the late 60s, written and published in 1972. And, I have some charts just to show what's kind of going on economically with the middle class. Especially around that time, we see this kind of illusion that, each generation's supposed to do or is going to do or has done better than their parents, better than the generation before them. And that was the case up until the end of World War II. And then the percentages dropped. And I put one with China, which shows where they kind of cross in the early to mid 60s. I think this is an interesting kind of graph or chart to look at as well. We talk about this middle class as, it's open to everybody in this country, and that's where you want to be. And, it's, once again, it's kind of this illusion that a lot of people don't realize. Family income, 43% of children born in the bottom quintile remain there as adults. That's almost half will not get into another income bracket. And conversely, 40% of children born in the top quintile remain there as adults. So there's kind of this struggle, and the middle class kind of gets played out as the the battleground for where people want to get to. And I think the chapter, the book, The Hidden Injuries of Class, really shows that the middle class, while it might not be an illusion, it's something that people fight to get into, but more importantly, they fight not to fall out of, and for the people in the rich class, the upper class, like Warren Buffett said, they have to have this middle class to maintain their dominance. And, another view is, this fading American dream. We talk about this American dream. If you just get this job and, you stay with it and you work hard, that you will get somewhere. But from a sociological standpoint, there's this lack of comfortability there. There's these case studies that Sennett and Cobb, talk to, who they've made it to the so-called middle class, but they really don't feel comfortable there. And they call it status incongruity, where they're working these jobs that they quote, work their way to get up to or able to get to, but they don't really want to be there. They don't really see it as work. They feel out of place. So the rate of people able to climb up the economic ladder has dropped. So there's this stagnation, and I think another important chart to look at is union membership. Union membership, or unions in general, get this bad name. They get talked about like, it's socialism and it's anti-capitalism and the best workers, and you never hear people from middle class or lower middle class really saying that, or rarely. It's people who want to exploit the individual workers, and say what you want about socialism and, the role of unions. There's nothing more, there's nothing more uniting than the ability to collectively bargain, and really fight for something, as a group. And I think, we can see that the people who benefit most from, disunion, from unions not being successful, is represented in this chart. Share of income going to the top 10%, not incoincidentally, started to go up more as union membership declined. This union membership declined, about the time this book was written. So I think it's important to see, when we talk about unions, are anti-American, who's saying that? And I think, this book really looks at, who this middle class is, and instead of feeling empowered to reach a certain place, they almost feel more imprisoned, to not fall back into another way, regardless of happiness. And I think that's a metric that gets less discussed, in pure economics, maybe, because it's more about numbers. But, kind of like we've seen in the movies that we've watched this week, some of those themes, like there's always somebody who's benefiting, and there's always, there's the zero-sum game where the people on the top, for them to get what they want, somebody else has to lose. And they create this kind of false narrative where, unions are bad. If you just work hard, and save, you'll be okay. And, it's not true. Because there's plenty of people who we saw in those movies who saved, and there's plenty of stories about savings and loans where people did the right thing, and they were their lives were destroyed by people who took advantage of them. So, this idea of class and who decides who's in what class and who feels comfortable being in that class is an important concept to understand. I think this book did a good job. Yeah, it's dated. It's 45 years old, but, I think a lot of those ideas and themes are just as prevalent today as they were back then. So I would strongly recommend people, whether it's economics, historians, sociologists, need to, or probably already have, checked this book out, because it really ties together a lot of disciplines and themes that, kind of pervade our society.